Thank you for joining us today for our seminar in the Journey to Science series at Onondaga Community College. This seminar is sponsored by the Bridges to Baccalaureate grant. Today, we are welcoming Damian Hall. Damian graduated from OCC in 2018 with an associate's in math and science, and then transferred to SUNY Upstate. At Upstate, he earned a bachelor's degree in clinical laboratory sciences, and he now works in the lab at Auburn Community Hospital as a medical technologist. As you're watching Damian share his story, if you have any questions, there's a question and answer button at the top. You can click that and submit your questions at any time, and we will cover them at the end. Damian, thank you very much for sharing your time and your story with us. Welcome.
Thanks, Dr. Hamilton. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to speak, actually, because it hasn't been that long since I was in the same spot that you are, kind of at OCC, figuring out what I'm going to be taking at OCC, and then figuring out where I'm going to be going after OCC. So it's nice to be talking to all of you. So I grew up in Syracuse, actually not that far from OCC. I went to a small Catholic high school, and I always kind of knew that OCC would be the next step for me after college. I had a couple older siblings that had gone to OCC, so it was always a very familiar place, and I knew that it would probably be part, of my next step in my education. Starting in kind of high school, I think probably in like 9th grade, when I started taking like earth science and biology and chemistry and everything, that's when I really started to realize that I was very much a math science type of student as opposed to history English. And I had a very good biology teacher. Because of how small my high school was, I had actually the same teacher for biology and chemistry. And I would say that's where it all started, my love of biology and chemistry. She was very much a hands-on teacher, and we did a lot for high school students. And so that's when I realized that, when I went on to college, I would be probably pursuing something, biology related. So then I graduated and I started at OCC, and I basically applied into the math science program. I knew that's where I wanted to be. I wasn't 100% sure of where I wanted to go after OCC, but I knew that I would probably figure it out along the lines of OCC, and I knew I would probably stay within the Syracuse kind of central New York region in something math science related. So I started in the math science program, taking most of the, the general prereqs and everything. And I think probably so if I started in the fall of 2016, I think by the spring of 2017, I had attended a kind of a table session of all the other schools from kind of around the area, like Lemoyne, John Fisher, SU, all the different schools in the area. And I remember coming up to a table from Upstate, and the only thing I knew about Upstate at that time was that it was a hospital in Syracuse. I didn't actually realize that I knew there was the medical college, but I didn't realize that there was other colleges involved, specifically the College of Health Professions. So I picked up a brochure, and I had flipped through it and looked at all the different programs that they offered for a 4-year degree. And there was one that kind of stood out to me, and that was clinical laboratory sciences. It gave a brief overview of the program. It talked about how it was very much a hands-on diagnostic, kind of almost like detective-like field of basically figuring out problems and getting values for doctors and all that stuff. And so I was really interested in that. And so I kind of did my own outside research of school. And upon looking at the prereqs and everything, I realized that most everything that I was going to be taking in the math science program at OCC actually was almost perfectly set up to get me into the program at Upstate. It was almost a match for match perfect. And so I remember going to my advisor at the time, and kind of telling her that I wanted to probably pursue this. And she was like, oh, okay, well, it seems like you are in a pretty good spot, you know, like with what you're going to be taking in math science. And then she kind of was like, maybe you should reach out to them and see if there's anything that you should add into the program you're taking right now. And just to help booster your application if you actually want to apply there. So I had done that, and for the most part, when I had reached out to Upstate, it was they were like, well, if you're doing this at OCC, you're probably going to be in a pretty good spot. And then they suggested maybe a couple other things, which I had actually planned on taking when I was at OCC. But yeah, while I was at OCC, I definitely had a very good, I think a good like formation, and it was a really good place for me to start in the whole kind of world of science. I had very good science teachers, whether it was in Gen Bio 1 and 2, Gen Chem 1 and 2, A&P. And then with the optional courses I took, like microbiology and then medical terminology, I felt that everything I was taking at OCC really helped me. Like, it gave me a very good idea of what, you know, I was going to get by pursuing a degree in a science-related field. And so I think if that was in the spring of 2017, I knew for sure by the fall of 2017 that that was my plan to attend Upstate afterwards. So then while I was at OCC, I just made sure I was staying on track with my the math science program, and then making sure that everything was checked off for Upstate. And by the spring of 2018, I had completed everything I needed for the math science program, and I graduated. And then in the meantime, I had been applying to Upstate, and I had been accepted. And yeah, so then I was ready to transition to Upstate. And so a little bit about Upstate is Upstate has 4 different colleges within it. They have the medical university, obviously, but then they also have the College of Graduate Studies, which is for like PhDs and then your master's in a couple different programs. They have the College of Nursing, and then they have the College of Health Professions, which is what I was going into. And the program, which I got accepted into, the Clinical Laboratory Sciences program, that's part of the College of Health Professions. And what makes all the programs in the College of Health Professions unique is that you come into the college with a 2-year degree. Quite a lot of people actually, and just speaking from my experience at Upstate in my graduating class, a lot of people actually came from OCC and then other community colleges, and were coming into this college, you know, with their 2-year degree. And when you graduate from the College of Health Professions, you graduate with a 4-year degree. So it's like a 2+2 program in a way, where you come in with your 2-year degree and then you spend 2 years at Upstate in whatever program you have, you know, you found interest in, you applied to, and then once you graduate with a 4-year degree in that program. So in my case, I graduated with a bachelor's in clinical laboratory sciences. And how the programs at Upstate work are usually for the first two, for probably about the first 2 semesters, you're taking what they would call, not like prerequisites like you were taking at OCC, but they're like kind of the general classes where like you might take like an ethics course. You take some of the stuff that it's not really like the meat and the potatoes of what your actual profession degree is going to be in. And then usually once you get into what would be your senior year, you do a lot of rotations, and where you're actually out in the field, you're working, you're gaining experience. And I'll talk about this in a little bit, how you're actually kind of basically putting your resume out there by going to these different rotation sites. All these different rotation sites get to see you as a student, as a potential worker, and while you're gaining experience, you're also basically making a name for yourself and possibly securing yourself a job. So with my experience at Upstate, I had finished my associates and now I'm starting at Upstate, and most of my classes that I was going to be taking to start with at Upstate, were I'm trying to think back about some of the general stuff I had to take before I really got into like the meat and the potatoes of my program. But I'm trying to think for a second. It was like there was some of the stuff I could have taken at OCC, but most of them were specific to Upstate. Like I was taking, actually, let me go back a little bit and kind of explain. So the program for clinical laboratory sciences, that program is basically designed for people that want to work in a lab. Clinical laboratory scientists can work in hospital labs. They can actually end up working in research labs if you're more into research. There's specifically with the program at Upstate, there's more of a you can branch off a little bit and you can do more of a research kind of focused program as opposed more to the diagnostic side, which is what I chose. And that's called medical biotechnology as opposed to medical technology, which is the diagnostic side of it. Yeah, you can either do, you can choose the diagnostic or the biotech side of it. And when you choose, but the program that I was in, the diagnostic side of it, you're being prepared to go out and work in, like I said, hospital labs, doctor's office labs, or potentially some research labs, but for the most part, that's the biotech side. And as a med tech, you work it's your job basically to get the doctors and providers and nurses and then the answers that they need to treat patients. So you are the kind of, in a way, the detective behind the scenes. You are figuring answers out and you're getting those answers to doctors, and then they're taking those lab values and answers and they're using it to form their care plan for their patients. And so it's a very hands-on field. For the past, year and 6-7 months that I've been working, there hasn't been a day where I've been like, oh, I'm bored, whatever. Every day is like a new sort of challenge because like not every person that comes into the hospital, is sick with the same thing, or, there's always someone presenting with something different. And so it's always changing. Every day is different, and it's always kind of a new puzzle to solve. But for the most part, what your focus of study is going to be at Upstate is in hematology, microbiology, it's called chemistry, but not in the chemistry sense that you might think of what you're taking at OCC with acids and bases and beakers and everything. It's more of the body chemistry and how all of your body, the chemistry of the human body. Microbiology, I might have already said that, immunology, and then a couple other little categories that you have to study. And so that's kind of where, once I started at Upstate, I started taking classes in those. So I had a hematology class, which hematology is the study of the blood, basically. So it's like you learn in depth what cells make up, the components of blood, the plasma side, the red blood cells, the platelets, the white blood cells. You learn all of that. You learn what is normal, you learn what is abnormal, you learn what might cause something to become abnormal. You learn all the processes of, how stuff is formed, how the body, regenerates certain aspects of the bloodstream and everything. And then once you go out into clinicals, then you practice all of that. And it's the same thing for each of the different, I guess, classes that you're taking. So for like microbiology, you're learning of all the different organisms, the normal organisms within you, the pathogenic organisms which, cause disease, how they cause disease, where they're normally found in the environment and how you might get them, how they're treated, how, we have, certain organisms that become super drug resistant, and then all the different drug categories that, are used to treat different organisms. With immunology, immunology is the study, obviously, of the immune system. So you learn basically what your body, the immune system, the defenses you're born with, what you acquire through something like vaccines or exposure to an actual sickness, and then all the different ways that your immune system functions, how your immune system can actually turn against you, harm you. And so, and then I'm trying to think what else. And then the general chemistry, that's actually a huge portion of, I'd say, your schooling, because when most people hear that I work in a lab, people think, oh, so you do like routine blood work. And routine blood work most of the time falls under what I would consider like the chemistry side of the lab, where you're learning about all the different enzymes your liver makes, how your body, uses oxygen to like fuel the basic processes within your body, all that different type of things. And so that would be probably the biggest portion of your schooling. And that would probably have been my, I'd say that was probably the hardest thing, because that was just such a that was probably the hardest class, I guess, to take in transferring to upstate, because it was such a big, expansive class, and it required a lot of, it almost was kind of like the accumulation of how I had learned to study and everything from OCC and from high school, and I really had to apply that when I was taking that class. And then, so those were basically the bulk of the class I was taking. Then I had other classes, like I had to take a pathology course, which goes into basically all of it's in a way, it's kind of like anatomy and physiology. You kind of are studying the different body systems and kind of all the different diseases associated with them. It was definitely a very short and condensed course, because you can take very broad courses on that. And but it was short and condensed. And then other ones kind of included a medical ethics course, where you learned basically about the ethics of being in healthcare and what can go wrong, and how things go wrong in healthcare. I'm trying to think of some other classes I had to take specifically for my program. Some are escaping me right now, but yeah, for the most part, once you've taken those classes, then you shift over into your clinical rotation, and in that, then you're going out and you're actually working in labs. You're basically, I guess, doing it's almost like an internship in a way, where you're working because you're not getting paid. But you're really taking what you learned in the classroom and you are applying it into real life in the job fields that you'll be working in. And I think a lot of people might think, oh, an internship, that sounds boring, because I might just be I'm going to be thrown in a corner doing something. But when you're actually in a healthcare field and you're doing your clinical rotations, you're actually doing what you'll be doing as an employee in whatever lab or whatever you're going to be in. And so it's very much you get to work, you almost get a bit of a, I'm trying to think of the word, you get a little bit of a taste of what it'll actually be like to be an employee, in my case, in a clinical lab. And so I want to talk a little bit now about how why I think some people or why I think like programs like this at Upstate are really good, like a good next step from OCC. So, having worked in the field that I'm in for about a year and 6 months now, I've seen, especially over the past couple months, there's such a shortage of a lot of healthcare workers, as a lot of people have probably seen on the news, especially with like nurses and stuff, but it's even more, I guess, dire in some of these other healthcare settings because I think so few people know about some of these programs. And so there's not a lot of people going into these programs. And so, as a result, there's not as many people coming out. So these programs, like especially the ones at Upstate, there's such a huge need for people that I hope that, after hearing this talk and everything, you might kind of be interested to look, even if you aren't looking at the clinical laboratory sciences program, but other health professions associated, like maybe you might have an interest in like medical imaging, like CT, X-ray and stuff. Upstate has a program for that. If you have always liked the idea of like sonography with sonograms and everything, Upstate has a program for that. They have programs for respiratory therapy, but all these different programs are really good kind of next step for people that want to be kind of in maybe a healthcare science type field, but don't really know, like, you're at OCC right now and you're not really sure where you could go to get a degree like that. It's right basically, in your backyard in Syracuse. Upstate has programs like that. And by starting at OCC, you're really putting yourself in a good spot to be there because Upstate and, all the programs at OCC are starting to align where everything you're taking at OCC is transferring right to Upstate, and you're preparing yourself in a really good way for a place like Upstate. And I can say that from attending OCC, being in the math science program, and taking all the classes I did, and having all of the opportunities that OCC gave me, I felt very prepared to be, at a place like Upstate. And that's another thing I would say too, is that take advantage of everything that OCC has to offer, like these talks and all the different extracurricular kind of clubs and other ways that Upstate, or I keep like switching my two schools. Everything that OCC has to offer you, take advantage of that because it'll actually come in handy, and a lot of opportunities that you might be part of at OCC actually will translate into another opportunity that you might get to be a part of at some place like Upstate and whatever. So yeah, I would definitely say, if you're at OCC right now and you aren't really sure of, where you want to be, or if what you're taking right now is going to actually translate into you being able to transfer to a school and get a useful, a degree that you actually could get a job with right out of school, I would definitely say consider your options that Upstate is offering you. Because speaking from experience, after I graduated from Upstate, I had to sit for a certification exam, which is basically like a cumulative exam of my schooling at Upstate. And it's basically, if you want to work in a lab in New York State, you have to sit for that certification. New York is pretty strict on a lot of their certifications and who can work where and who can work with what type of thing. But once I sat for that and I passed it, I immediately had a job. And I think that's what the nice thing I've realized something that I got out of school was I didn't have to worry about finding a job after college. I knew as soon as basically I started at Upstate that my degree was going to render me a job right out of school. And, for the most part, it's been a very well paying job, which I know a lot of people are worried about finding a job that's going to, you know, make them some money after college. But all these programs that, you know, at Upstate, especially in the healthcare field, are going to get you basically a job like that, where right after school you're going to be into a job, very hands-on, that will be giving you a good paycheck every week, and you won't be bored at these jobs. These jobs are they're fast-paced, they're always changing, and yeah, it's really making you use your brain, and it's a very much a science-heavy field, which I think, you know, if you're listening to this talk or whatever, that it's a job that you most likely would want. Trying to think, one other thing I had to say about my field is that, especially with, or I guess with the lab sciences too, it's always it's an ever-changing field. As you know, as technology advances, and you know, treatment kind of is changing and becoming more technology focused. So does the lab and everything. So, I mean, if you also have an interest in technology, the lab sciences field is a very good place for people with kind of a technologically based mind too, because there is a lot of tech involved in it, along with actual hands-on science. And so it's kind of a really good combination of both of those worlds. So I would definitely, if you aren't sure of what you might want to do with a math science degree, I would definitely consider the clinical laboratory sciences program at Upstate. I think you would, I think a lot of people might not know about it, and a lot of people might think, oh, well, just working in a lab sounds really boring, and, you know, you're not doing a whole lot. Maybe you don't even get to see the patients. You don't even get to see, you know, the gore of the hospital, or, you know, the really good stuff. But you actually do. You get to see a lot of, in a way, you actually see every patient, because, you know, you're dealing with most every patient sample is coming through the lab. So in a way, you know, you might not be having the face-to-face interaction with the patient, but you actually are kind of impacting every patient that comes into the hospital, because you are, you know, you're helping figure out what's wrong with them, in a way that, you know, is so critical to their treatment. But yeah, so I think that's something to consider. And yeah, I hope that, you know, by somebody like me talking to you about the lab, that, you know, it'll raise more awareness, and that more people will consider, you know, like going into the field and whatever, because right now we are really hurting for more people in the lab. It's, you know, we're going through a little bit of a shortage with workers, and I know that there's a lot of people out there, you know, studying science, and, you know, who aren't really sure with what they can do, or where a degree from OCC will take you. But I would like to, you know, stand here and talk to you as proof that, you know, a degree from OCC, and then even just staying within the SUNY system, can get you to a point of having a very meaningful science-based job. But trying to think, what are some other things that I wanted to talk about my time at OCC? Oh, yeah.
There's a question actually that might help you think of some other things. Professor Page is wondering whether there's any classes at OCC that you had that were a bit of a struggle. Like, was there ever a class where you had to maybe refine your study skills a little bit? And what did you find were some of your best strategies for learning, understanding the material beyond just basic memorization?
That is a good question. Well, so, you know, as a math science major student, some of them, I was going to say that obviously there was some math, which was a lot harder for me. I was definitely more of a science than math, but I also, you know, was pretty good at math. So there were some math courses, like I think Calc 2, which naturally is just hard, and you have to really put the hours into it. One of the, I think the more challenging courses I took was, or like that I found, were some of, like, when I started to take kind of the optional courses, which, like, for me at OCC, microbiology was technically something that I didn't have to take while I was at, actually, now that I think about it, it might have been, I think at least one, I think a semester of it. I think you could have taken a full year of it. I think that was optional, but I think at least one semester was required. But I think like when I started taking courses like that, where it wasn't like Gen Bio or Gen Chem, where it was actually like a pretty, I think, because I think the microbiology was like a 300 or maybe like a 250 level course. Is it a 200? Is it a 200? Okay. A 200 level course at OCC. I think classes like that really made me have to, like, going into it, I was like, okay, this definitely, the material just like, it was presented in such a way where I feel like I had to, it was more of, I had to learn how to summarize my notes at the end of every class, and I had to review. I think that's something I carried over from OCC into Upstate, is that once I started taking those, like microbiology and even A&P, I had to start like condensing my notes down after I took notes in class, because I've always been very much a note taker. Like, even if it's to the extent where I'm just writing way too much, I take notes and then I would have to condense down my notes, and I really had to start. And I think I started mostly towards the end of my time, probably like maybe my last 2.5 semesters at OCC, really starting to get into the habit of reviewing at least my, like, if reviewing my notes from the class before going into my next class. So basically, I think, I guess, staying on top of it would be what I would call it, and is how I kind of strategized about, you know, getting through these courses, not just memorizing the material, but actually applying it. And also too, something which I think I struggled with at first, only because the high school that I went to and graduated with, I feel like at some points it was really hard to go to some of the teachers for help. And so I think I didn't do a lot of that in high school, where I wish I had. But once I got to OCC, I actually leaned heavily on going to my professors for help. And I think catching something when I didn't understand it, instead of waiting until either like a couple of days before the test, when I had multiple concepts that I didn't understand because I didn't understand that one thing in class, I tried to catch that early, where if I didn't understand something, I would go to the professor, try to understand that, and then take that knowledge that I now had and be able to apply it to the other things that I didn't understand. So it made, you know, it kind of helped me solve those other problems that I didn't understand. But there were definitely times where I did not do that, and I found myself in a panic the night before a test maybe, or trying to figure something out on a homework, and I just could not figure it out. And so it was times like those where I really made sure after that to be going to a professor for help, and also too, like, relying on classmates was a huge part in some of the classes I was in. I know some people, you know, like, don't, you know, find it hard maybe to reach out to somebody sitting right next to them or whatever, but I particularly found it easy to make friends with these people, and, you know, like, sharing notes with other people, because it's funny that when I would compare my notes with other people in class, how other people take notes and how other people can pick things out of a lecture that maybe you can't. And so I think too, by like, you know, linking up with other students and or other people that are in your labs, or making sure you actually, you know, if you are taking a lab with somebody, you have a lab partner, really kind of like sharing stuff back and forth with what you might have heard in class and what they might have taken notes with in class. That's another really good way of, I think, learning and also figuring stuff out, because like I said, other people have, you know, everyone kind of brings a different thing to the table and can help you, you know, maybe work through a problem where you couldn't work through it yourself. So I definitely would say, yeah, like, making sure to stay on top of things, going to your teachers for help, and then also like sharing information with other students and kind of, you know, networking with other people in your class was definitely a way that I found helped me excel and succeed in these science heavy courses.
Well, it sounds like you put in the hard work at OCC, sort of figuring out how to study, and it sounds like you found your recipe for success. How prepared did you feel once you started at Upstate? And you mentioned a lot of students already had a bachelor's degree. So sort of looking around you in your classes, did you feel like you were adequately prepared?
I, for the most part, I mean, kind of, like starting at, obviously, like it was a whole new like college and whatever. So I was just, for a little bit, I was trying to figure out like, okay, like where do I fit in here, blah, blah, blah. But I think once we started taking classes, I definitely felt like I was glad that I had, the foundation that I had from OCC, because I definitely felt like I was starting out on the right foot. But there were definitely, I feel like the pace definitely was much faster at OCC. Or at OCC, at Upstate, it definitely all of a sudden, it was just, I think if anything changed from the transition from OCC to Upstate, it was just the pace of these classes. I feel like it was just more information in a shorter time. So I felt prepared in the strategies that I had acquired, studying, taking notes, all the different type of stuff. I just felt like I had to almost kind of turn the volume, turn the speed up on them a little bit, and just be a little bit more diligent about it. But I would definitely say I felt very prepared coming from OCC, especially with like the courses I had taken. I feel like I got, the foundation was very good in those courses. So I felt like there wasn't times where I was like, I know I took this class at OCC and I know I should have learned this, but now I don't learn this. So I feel like I had to go back and learn. I never really had to do that. Some of the classes that I had taken at OCC, I kept my notes, and I actually used those as ways of going back and kind of like one particular case was when I had to take my microbiology. It was like I think it was like a 500 level course at Upstate as opposed to a 200 level course at OCC. But there were some of the basics I learned at OCC. I actually was able to go back and look at those and be able to actually like refresh my mind when preparing or when doing stuff in the 500 level course. So I would say that I felt very prepared, transitioning from OCC to Upstate. I definitely felt like I was going in there, ready to succeed.
It sounds like the skills you acquired at OCC set you up for success at Upstate, and I especially like that you were able to go back and look at your notes. Sometimes students will joke at the end of the semester that they're now going to burn their notes. I'm going to start telling them not to do that because you never know when they might come in handy.
Yeah, and I mean, that was just one example of the like the microbiology example I gave, but I think I even for like, because I know like the math science program at OCC, it's, at least for me, it was pretty sequential, where it was like I started with Gen Bio 1, and then I moved into Gen Bio 2 and all these like Gen Chem 1, Gen Chem 2, and then I took organic chemistry. But like even the progression just from those, like from semester to semester, I always made sure to save my notes, because I knew that like when I was in Gen Bio 2 that I might have to look back at stuff from Gen Bio 1. And instead of having, actually Professor Page was my Gen Bio 1 professor. So instead of, being in Gen Bio 2 and having to go back to Professor Page and asking, or having to go to my Gen Bio 2 professor, embarrassed that I didn't remember a concept from Gen Bio 1, I could actually go back and look at my notes from Gen Bio 1. So even in that regard, while I was at OCC, I saved my notes because I knew I might need to go back and, refresh my mind on something. So yeah, I would definitely say, if anything, if you take anything else from this talk, save your notes, especially, if you are in a science related major, because a lot of the stuff I think you learn in your prereqs, you actually might need to brush up on or refresh when you are, if you're at Upstate, or you transfer to somewhere like SUNY ESF or something. The classes that you're taking at OCC are really like good and will actually be helpful in refreshing your mind when you're going into some of these higher level courses. And yeah, so I would, yeah, don't throw away your notes. Keep your notes.
That is solid advice. I will admit that I still have all of my notes from both my undergraduate and graduate school days. They're all filed away.
I still have quite a few. I actually also kept a lot of the, when I was taking courses at Upstate, a lot of times there was like we would get the teachers, because also too, another thing about Upstate is that the class sizes are usually pretty small. So it's like a pretty intimate learning like environment where the classes are small and there's a lot of the teachers have the ability to actually like interact with most of the students because like the class sizes aren't huge. There's not like 70 to 100 people in every class. There's like maybe 15 to 20. So it's like they're very small and the teachers actually have time. And so the teachers actually put a lot of time into making like very, almost like packet type, like they'll be able to like condense everything down, and they give you really good learning materials outside of like required textbooks, but they have like their own, I guess, like supplemental material. But a lot of times they would be like spiral bound and you could take notes in them and all these different things. Like they were almost like workbooks, and they weren't really like workbooks. There wasn't activities to do in them. They were just a lot of good condensed down material that you could reference when you were working on case studies, when you were preparing for a test. But like I've even saved a lot of those, and I still use those in my day-to-day work in my career field, actually. I guess another course I actually forgot to kind of talk about at Upstate is, and it's actually one of the areas that I've realized that I've liked most in the lab, is blood banking or transfusion medicine, which is when you work in like a blood bank, you actually are doing like, you are preparing blood products for transfusion and for people that need, blood, or they need platelets, or, you're hearing about the Red Cross is always hounding people to donate blood or donate plasma or donate platelets. When you work in blood bank, you're on the opposite end of that. You're actually doing the management of that, in preparing those products to be transfused into people. But the supplemental material that I actually got at Upstate from my teacher, and that I have used that so many times in working through problems in blood bank. And so, yeah, even some of the stuff that I've gotten, like that I got from Upstate, I actually still use that, every day on my job. I actually have those in wherever I'm working, like whatever bench I'm working on in the lab, I'll have that in a drawer right below me. And I've flipped through that multiple times. And so, yeah, I would definitely say, I guess, from that question that Professor Page asked, like save a lot of your, you'll acquire a lot of stuff on your journey from, you're all starting at OCC like I did, from your journey from OCC to wherever else you're going to end up. You're going to acquire a lot of stuff. But yeah, if you feel like something should be saved, save it, because you will probably have to come back to it at some point, and you'll be glad that you saved it when, you're studying for a final in your senior year of something and you didn't remember something, but then you realized you took a course about that at OCC, and you'll have that, packet or whatever. And yeah, you'll come back to it and you'll be really glad you saved it.
Well, what an advertisement for being a lifelong learner, right? It really never does stop. Now, you have the benefit of hindsight, but if you could sit down with yourself, right? You just started at OCC, or maybe you have coffee with someone who just starts at OCC. They're in their first semester and they don't know what they're doing. They kind of have a vague idea about their plans. What's something that you would want them to know? Sort of a piece of advice from someone who's been there, done that.
Well, when I started OCC too, I knew that I wanted to start in the math science program, but like I said, I didn't know where I wanted to go after that. And so I think when my first classes had been set up at OCC, they were very it was like pre-calc and English, a history type of thing. But then after that, I knew I would get to pick my own. I would kind of, I would be able to have a bit more of a say in what I was taking. So I think to someone that's starting an OCC who maybe doesn't know where they want to be, I would definitely say, well, first off, like if you're starting there, make sure you have a good, place of if you are definitely more math science or history English or whatever. Because like if you aren't sure and you're taking some general, I feel like when you're taking some like very general kind of all over the board courses, it might be hard to really figure out where you want to be. But like if you have an idea, so if like you know you're a math science major, I would definitely say kind of explore some of the courses that, and like OCC offers quite a range of different science related courses you can take. But I would definitely say, so yeah, if you're starting out and you aren't sure of what direction you might want to go in, I would say definitely explore some of the courses that OCC has to offer. And also too, like go to, like I said before, go to your advisor and go to your professors about any, anything that might interest you, and they will help, like you will get help about like what course might, like courses you might find interesting and courses that will be helpful to you in, pursuing whatever degree when you figure out. So yeah, I would say that someone that's starting at OCC, definitely rely heavily on the I guess the advisors, the professors and everything at OCC, and explore your options at OCC, because OCC is a really good place to explore all the different, because I feel like all the classes at OCC are a really good place where you can figure out, like, you might realize, oh, I can take a microbiology course, and then you take a microbiology course at OCC, and then you realize this is actually something I really like. And so you realize you might actually want to take more advanced microbiology courses, and then you might actually want to get like, your PhD in microbiology, or you might want to, that's kind of a huge step. You want to get your master's or something in microbiology. And so it's like, it's stuff like that, or like you take, you take like a chemistry course and you realize I really don't like chemistry. So then you think, okay, maybe I'm more of a biology type person. So then you take more kind of the biology side courses and you realize, oh, I really like A&P. And so it's like kind of stuff like that, where I would say explore what OCC has to offer. And I think in doing that, you'll find something that will really interest you. And then I guess another point of advice I would give is like as I said about finding the table sessions, whatever, like explore what all the colleges around OCC and like in this area have to offer too, because a lot of the colleges that are within the Syracuse area, like Lemoyne, SU, SUNY SF, Upstate, Utica, all these colleges, they have programs which basically what you take at OCC will help you get into programs like that. So yeah, I would definitely say explore what OCC has to offer, and then explore like all the different options that you have around OCC, so that when you are ready to transfer, you kind of know where you want to be and everything.
Thank you. That's definitely great advice, and it's something that we tell our students all the time, right? Talk to us. We will help you explore your options, and there are quite a few. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to share with our students today, and we will be back in the spring for the next session in our series in the Journey to Science. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, Damian.